Thank you for joining us. If you can start out with just introducing yourself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So I'm Gidon Eshel, and I teach at Bard College in upstate New York, and I am a geophysicist by training, and I study the environmental impacts of food, agriculture, dietary choices.
Perfect. Um, you started, as you just mentioned, you started your career in geophysics. How did that path eventually lead you to studying food and its impact on the climate?
Yeah, it's not a traditional path. Yeah, I grew up in an agricultural community in the northern part of Israel, kibbutz, for those who know it, it's an agricultural commune. And I work, all kids work, and I worked in the dairy farm. I absolutely loved it. Worked there for all my high school since age 13 until I went to the military at 18. After the military, I also raised cattle, beef cattle, in the northern part of Israel, and I did that too a number of years. And loved that as well. I thought at some point of becoming a vet because the daily visit of the vet was definitely the highlight of my day. I was really interested in that, and I started that, but I quickly realized that I gravitate much more toward math and physics. So I switched schools and got first undergraduate, then PhD in geophysics. And after a few years of doing regular geophysics, I kind of realized that I'm interested in converging those two. And that was around, it started in the early 2000s, and since then, that's mostly what I've been doing.
It is definitely a interesting path.
Thank you.
Um, was there a moment during your research and your personal life and this transition into the food studies that you realize just how powerful our food choices are in shaping the environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what drew me to that in the first place, because um, I studied a very traditional, sort of purely academic geophysics, but I myself am a very avid outdoors person and hiking, biking, and so on. So I was very attuned to the environment, first in Israel and then when I came here in the U.S. and I read my work is definitely resting on earlier work of other pioneers, I guess. Rachel Carson is one of them, and Francis Moore Lapé is definitely an important other one. Um, and there was was or is actually, I don't know, a professor at Cornell by the name of David Tillman, um, who I uh, I thought very highly of, and he made those points less rigorously than I make them, but he made them, and they were very interesting to me.
Perfect. So I'm very familiar with Rachel Carson, but not as much as the others. So interesting. What's the biggest year surprise you've uncovered about how different foods, say like beef versus beans, compare when it comes to their environmental footprint?
It wasn't really that surprising to me, honestly, since I was really intimately familiar with production of beef and dairy in a very, very intimate way, and other things, just by being in the kibbutz when I was a boy, the kibbutz definitely grew chickpeas and lentils, and I this is what my diet has always been primarily based on. And I also realized that very quickly that they are really requiring small fractions of what the animal-based foods do. And yeah, so that was both intuitive and blazing fast for me.
Okay. I mean, kind of going off on that animal raising and how much they affect the climate. Take say that and put that side by side, like maybe reducing some of your intake of animal protein and put that side by side with other climate solutions like solar panels or electric cars. And how big of a difference can that change in your diet really make, or food in general, to the climate compared to those?
Yeah. So the truth is that it's not the most natural comparison. The reason is that almost all the things that we concern ourselves with are like environmental tweaking of our lives. Other than food, they are mostly, almost exclusively focused on greenhouse gas emissions and their direct contribution to climate change. Um, with food, the effects are much more varied. And while it is true that you can lower markedly the greenhouse gas footprint of your diet, um, that's not the most convincing or the most urgent reason to change your diet. Other environmental effects are, for example, if you think about inland freshwater bodies in the US. Many of them are in bleak, bleak state, like Chesapeake Bay or the northern Gulf of Mexico or Lake Erie and so forth. And periodically, either one of those is pronounced dead, and then it rises from its ashes briefly, only to be pronounced dead once more, and so forth. The reason for those repeated deaths is almost always either entirely related to agriculture or deeply related to agriculture, but sharing the limelight with other human activities. So that's an example of a motivation to change your diet that is unrelated to greenhouse gas emissions and therefore not directly comparable to the benefit of, let's say, installing solar panels or switching to an electric car, but that are equally, or should be at least equally compelling. Another may be simply the volume or mass of water use. I mean, previously I talked about water pollution, but you can
Right.
also say, well, I mean, all states really um, west of the Rockies have considerable water limitations. Not eastern
Sure.
states, but west of the, or even west of the Great Plains. That's a very strong constraint on our ability to feed ourselves and on our livelihood writ large. And that too, I mean, it is true that if you eat a lot of arugula or spinach grown in the Central Valley of California, your water footprint is not trivial. But eliminating meat is a very, very good way to reduce your water footprint, and so on. So there are reasons, very compelling reasons, other than greenhouse gas emissions, to reconsider one's diet.
Speaking of considering one's diet, food is so tied up with culture, family, traditions, holidays. Now, how do you think we can balance honoring these traditions while also making diets more sustainable? Or is that even an issue?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. How many Thanksgivings are there in a year? One. Then throw
Well,
in Christmas, two, etc. I mean, by the time you are done with your personal exhaustive list, you're talking about a handful of days max. So I would say, I mean, if really, let's say, pork is particularly important to any one of your family's holidays, yeah, by all means, do it. The problem is not those very unique and rarefied days. The problem is, Monday through Friday every single week. So it's easy to accommodate, eat like there is no environment, like there's no tomorrow on Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day or any other day that is special to your family. But eating sensibly all other days. That seems to me a very easily reconcilable goals. Two very easily reconcilable goals.
and how many, taking how the culture today, how many days a week could people change their diet from their typical, large protein consumption diet to make a difference?
Oh, I mean, any any reduction in beef in particular is hugely influential, and I mean, depending on how much a person eats. Right now, I mean, they can, for example, if a person eats a lot of beef, even relative to American, the average American, then their reduction may mean, dropping their cropland occupation to 1/10 of what it is now. 1/10. I mean, think about it. The U.S., about half of all the surface area of the lower 48s is devoted to food production. So if people consume some amount of land or occupy some amount of cropland today, and that drops to a tenth, that's dramatic.
Yeah, it's very dramatic. And kind of going along that and thinking about what people can do, what policy shifts do you think could make kind of force people to make more climate friendly food choices without them feeling forced?
What policy levers?
Hmm.
Geez, I don't know. Right,
That's a tough question.
well, it's hard to it's hard to even busy yourselves with policy tweaks. But if one day somehow common sense returns to the table, um, I I personally believe in a particular type of calculation that balances the benefits that all foods, even beef or uh, bacon, whatever, the least desirable, even they have some benefits. Okay, and even lentils or chickpeas have some liabilities. So nothing is either purely black or purely white, and to cogently balance all the important benefits that they provide to a person, nutritional, and balance them against all the environmental liabilities that, like I said, all of them do, and
Hmm.
come up with a single measure of a single characteristic measure of a given food. Let's say chickpeas get 7 and beef get 4 and pork chops get 18, or totally arbitrarily. And um, and then for government to promote by subsidy or crop insurance. There are many tools that the USDA currently uses to promote various crops and the people who grow them. But instead of doing it as they do it today, which is, and it's not only the current administration, that goes back decades, of just doing it in the most mind numbingly stupid way possible, simply reflecting political wrangling and the
Hmm.
disproportionate power, political power of the so-called heartland states, and all of that. Replace all of that nonsense with a clear and coherent policy that promotes crops based on that balanced calculus of liabilities and benefits. That would be huge, but the political likelihood of that, alas, is limited.
And I agree with you on that. Um, and now take it less from an American focus and maybe kind of talk about how globally, kind of take it more to a global focus.
Yeah. Um, do you want to pose a question specific to that, or you just?
Kind of along the same lines about like what maybe, I mean, I know it's individual countries, but what policy could a country, I mean, it's the same, is it the same answer that you're
No, I don't
discussing with
think
the
it's the
US, or would you
same.
change that?
No, I mean, globally, one needs to distinguish different types and different classes of countries. So
Hmm.
the US and Australia and Japan and in Western Europe, that is very similar. So what I said about the US applies in all of those with slight permutations.
Hmm.
Um, it does not apply in other places, for sure. Like, I don't know, the countries of the Sahel region of Africa, where uh, cattle and livestock more broadly play different roles than they do here. It's they are, in some sense, their 401k. In some other senses, they are their insurance policy. In yet others, they may play a role in the sons and daughters odds of a good match and so forth. Uh, with those goals, first of all, I don't understand anything about them, and second of all, they seem to me to require completely different interventions that I sadly don't know much about. So I would say, for where livestock play those roles, they should not be subject at all to what I'm saying, because there are other potentially far more important considerations than just the environment.
Makes sense. Um, Again, kind of going back to livestock, there's a lot of buzz right now around plant-based meats and even lab-grown meats. Do you think these are real game changers or more of a niche solution?
I am initially, I mean, maybe 2, 3 years ago, I was pretty dismissive. Um, I have to confess here, this is a personal matter. I I don't ever eat them. I don't have any need for them. For me, nothing like that can possibly come anywhere near chickpeas that I make. Honestly, I mean, in terms of flavor, they don't come near. Okay. And that is all my guests will universally attest to that. Okay, I'm not such an ingenious cook, but I know how to cook Middle Eastern food, and none are not beyond or impossible or any of those things. They're not. I mean, I would be humiliated if somebody said, "Oh, this is better than impossible." Of course, it's better than impossible. It's infinitely better than impossible. um, but that's me. Um, and I see people who I love dearly, even my wife, who find, my wife works all day. She comes back sometimes at 6:30, and she's starving. And if I work too and there's no dinner on the table, she's ready to eat something. Okay. And you open the freezer and take one of those industrially produced patties, put them in the air fryer, and in 90 seconds they're ready. That's hard to top. That's convenience.
Yeah.
That's not anything else. But I try to always have those Middle Eastern things in our fridge, such that if you come, I mean, I bike to work. Okay, so I come back when the days that I teach, I come back really hungry, having biked 22 miles. If there is nothing in the fridge that I can just dig in the next 15 seconds, I will just be desperate, And when we are desperate, we make very stupid choices. So I
Well,
like to always have stuff, tabbouleh and hummus and a dish of lentils. There's almost always one of those or more in our fridge.
okay, well, one, I'm coming over to get your chickpeas. Chickpeas and lentils are some of my favorite things. Um, we're going to think about that on that question again on, is it an answer to help people kind of move away from eating livestock more than they already do? So kind of giving you that meat-free day or two. Is that going to actually help?
There are papers that examine the impact of Meatless Monday, I think, and that impact is definitely significant. So uh, I never really understood personally those kind of tricks. You could say I simply just don't need tricks. Like my watch is constantly telling me, "Oh, Gidon, how come you're not working out right this minute?" Well, I don't need this. In terms of intensity minutes, every week I exceed 1,000. I don't need those this prodding, but I take it that this is me and there are others just as valuable people as me, and for them it works. So good. If you need Meatless Monday to reduce your meat consumption, good, do it.
And would the production of those items produce less or cause less harm to the climate or the environment than just going ahead and eating some meat or livestock?
Yeah, I mean,
Like, is that production significant or counterbalancing the damage of the livestock?
yes, I think it is. And those papers that I invoked earlier, they do
Hmm.
show that. Um, Look, I mean, nothing comes close to being a plant eater. Like, just eat plants. And that is neither hard nor inspiring. No, it is just a reasonable and very intuitive dietary choice, and that's it. Nobody needs to admire or adore anybody because they eat plants. It will be ridiculous. because there's no sacrifice involved. I mean, sacrifice merits adoration or rewards, but without it, we don't merit. So that's at least my feeling. But think about it. Suppose you replace I don't know 20 grams of protein from meat, chicken or beef or
Okay.
whatever, with 20 grams from lentils. You occupy maybe 1% of the cropland you otherwise do. You contribute to water
Wow.
pollution no more than you drop your current contribution to water pollution to no more than 7 or 8%. In other words, you eliminate upward of 90%. And on and on. There was an interesting paper, a young graduate student at the University of Minnesota recently wrote a very nice PNAS paper about the number of air pollution related deaths directly related to meat production. It's in the tens of thousands a year nationwide. Every year, that many people die of those causes. I mean, we don't know the people our choices
Right.
indirectly kill, but we can still sort of conjure them up in our minds and think, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't kill those people? I think it would.
It definitely would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, what perspective, we've talked a lot about your perspective, but being that you come from a physics or science background, what perspective do you feel you bring to food and climate that maybe a nutritionist or an agricultural scientist would not bring?
Yeah, I mean, a good friend of mine with whom I write several papers a year introduced me recently when I gave a talk at Rockefeller, where he is. And he said, here is Gidon Eshel, and he is a cow physicist. Okay, so that was tongue in cheek and it was amusing. But physics has, physics offers a worldview and an approach to various puzzles that I don't think any other field does really. And whereas let's use the old adage, some of my best friends are nutritionists or epidemiologists. Um, the main difference between these people and the approach that I and some of my colleagues from the exact so-called exact sciences bring to the table is that we never consider a problem even remotely close to addressed unless we have its governing equations, that this leads to that. You know, there is a left hand side and a right hand side, and you plug in whatever is the appropriate set of values on the right, and you get an answer on the left, and that's the answer. With uncertainty ranges typically built in. In epidemiology, there's nothing like that. There are no governing equations that govern a person's health or even a population health, an easier problem. Um, so they have to resort to statistics, and it's a very powerful crutch. But that's a crutch. It's nicer to be able to walk without crutches. And statistics dependent science is inherently less persuasive, or should be inherently less
Mhm.
persuasive than science based on well known tractable equations. So, bringing that worldview to this business of what food and dietary choices do to the environment. I think that's what the group, not just me, I'm not alone, but there's a relatively small group of people with whom I work
Mm.
who all have those backgrounds, physics, applied math, electrical engineering, systems biology, that allow the level of rigor that I fear without us would not be present there.
Okay. And it makes complete sense. I have one last question for you. Um, it's also very easy for me to get behind this because I am a plant eater. Um, but looking at the future of food systems, is there anything that gives you hope or makes you optimistic?
Yeah, I think that in the end, I don't mean, 2080. I mean soon ish. I do have a feeling that various trends that are already in motion and whose motion is at this point solid and robust, will kind of take over. Like, for example, not related to my direct research, but just observing the scene, the environmental scene. There's now a very sort of concerted effort um, to eliminate renewable energy, eliminate electric car, or reduce the prominence of electric cars, and rejuvenate the decrepit coal industry. And it seems like the trends are pointing in the right direction. And yeah, this administration will manage to slow them down tragically and considerably. But I don't think that they could stop that. No, it's not happening. And the same thing with food. I do think earlier I said, for me personally, all those alternatives don't really speak to me because I don't need them.
Hmm.
Other people very much swear by them, and their market niche now is a niche, and it will become less of a niche. I'm quite sure of it, because this party that we're on of subjugating Earth resources as if we are the last generation who will ever rely on them, that can't go on. So I'm
Yeah,
somewhat hopeful.
great. Anything that you would like to add that we didn't touch on?
No, I think you did a very good job covering all our bases. So I'll just say thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. We really enjoyed this interview.
Same here.
Learned a
Thanks
lot.
again.